Okay, right. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to our 2023 annual results presentation. It's nice to see some people in person today. And we also got a number of people that are joining online. So I'm joined by Brett Clark, our CFO, and a number of my colleagues, including Tony Phillips, our chairman, who hasn't failed to attend a single earnings presentation. You know, he's been there through thick and thin, the good ones and the bad ones. So Tony, thanks for joining us again. Brett and I will be taking you through the results, following which we will be happy to take any questions that you may have. If you're following online, then I'd ask that you post your questions at the bottom of the screen. There is a little question tab, and you put the questions there, and our colleague Marlies will then put them to us at the end of the presentation, and we'll do our best to answer them for you. For the rest sitting here, I think it's best to hold the questions until after the presentation, and then we'll deal with those questions at that point in time. So I must say, looking back to 2023, it was a really tough year in many respects. Most of you will appreciate that. And when we are finally at the end, we are very satisfied with the performance, given the challenging conditions. And that really demonstrated a drive over a number of years now to not only produce more innovative products, but move into higher margin products and more sustainable products. And in time, I think that will really put our business in a good position. But it doesn't change the fact that we were very much exposed to the challenges that everybody faced in the local economy, which I'll talk about more a bit later. During the year, we reached some key milestones in our strategic development, including significant progress in a number of projects, capital projects, both for growth and also for operational resilience, and also in our business portfolio optimization. Until now, we haven't spoken about it exactly. We've used the word business portfolio optimization, but as I go through the presentation, I think you'll get some sense of how deliberate that is and how that in time will help change the mix of products, and is already helping to change the mix of products within our group. We've continued to expand on that basis in sectors with good prospects, while decreasing our exposure to others and enhancing our business model, which is becoming even more aligned to the circular economy over time. And in time, we'll also shift the business to become significantly more digitalized than what it is today. And that's something we spent the last 18 months really digging deep into. And I think there's so many exciting things that we can do in the digitalization space. Despite the challenging environment, we achieved record cash flow from operations of 2 billion rand, an 11% increase in net asset value per share to 33.64 rand, with most of our businesses achieving improvements in underlying operating profit by a recovery in margins following the significant squeeze that we also saw in 2022, and that offset lower volumes across most businesses. As I mentioned earlier, the weak economy was evident across many of our businesses. Volumes were negatively affected by subdued consumer demand, lower fruit exports due to adverse weather conditions, and that's particularly at the end of 2022, coming into 2023 in the fruit sector, and customers overstocking with imported containerboard and cartonboard early in 2023 and through 2023, on the back of stuff that was ordered in 2022 when there was a global supply crisis. You might recall in 2022, there were shortages of everything. And people just ordered, including imports. And those imports, they arrived when they weren't needed, basically in 2023. And that severely affected demand for our containerboard operations, Felixton and Piet Retief from Mkhondo. And in those businesses, as a consequence, we took unprecedented downtime last year to conserve cash and manage costs in those businesses. The global supply chain constraints that I was referring to just now that affected raw material sourcing, not only in paper, but in everything in 2022, did improve considerably last year. And that combined with a commercial downtime led to input costs declining from around mid-year, particularly in plastic polymers, the real commodity stuff, recovered paper and pulp. However, other costs increased, and that included electricity. As you all know, that doesn't have any bearing on demand. Coal, fuel, and certain imported raw materials which are linked to the dollar, with the rand weakening, those also increased during the course of last year. But we were nevertheless able to pass on some of the benefits to customers during the second half of the year, which we did. The fragility of Eskom, Transnet, and municipalities persisted through the year, manifesting an unreliable supply of electricity, besides the load shedding, unreliable supply of water, issues with rails and ports, and other things, and extensive costs to the South African economy, which we all bore. And it's interesting to note, and many of you who are in the business will know that during 2023, insurance underwriters began to exclude cover for certain aspects of these state-owned enterprises, perils, and entities. And where they didn't exclude, they extended the what do you call them? The excess time. So if you were previously, you would have 2 days. After 2 days of downtime, you could claim. They moved that to 2 weeks, and now we're back to 7 days in certain cases. So the cover's gone up, and the actual coverage has decreased in insurance as a consequence of our SOEs not being able, or they didn't recover. And what I saw, what my own observation, or our observation, in September last year, you might recall, one forgets quickly what actually happened, but in September last year, there was a sudden instance of stage 6 load shedding. From nothing, we were at stage 6. And I must say the last quarter just evaporated with that. After that, nothing really came back in any meaningful way. And so we have seen that while we can operate up until stage 5 or 6 through most of our operations, due to load curtailment agreements and others, our customers battle, and consumers battle. So it really does impact a lot. Our solar generation capacity and process designs, and I'll talk to the process designs just now, do allow us to run in those circumstances. But as I mentioned, that isn't always helpful if your customers aren't running. And we have installed additional generators in certain plants where, they've got solar and you need a generator to run properly at night, for example. And in others, we've instituted what we call a generator readiness program across our group. And that entails sorting out your electrical reticulation in the business, in the factory, for example, to be able to plug in a generator at one point and run the key parts of the factory without having to adjust things. And you'll be surprised to know, most big factories have got multiple distribution boards and quite a complicated reticulation system, which hasn't been designed for single point of entry from that point of view of distribution. And so we've spent the last year really getting our plants generator ready. And that happened, that you would use, for example, if a municipality has a catastrophic outage, the substation, which happens for whatever reason, then you can rent a generator, bring it on a truck, plug it in, and you'll be operational within a day. And unfortunately, that is part of our life here in South Africa at the moment. All of this has come at a significant capital cost, of course, and also fuel cost. Our diesel costs last year were 33 million compared to 10 million the year before. And it's diverted attention from other business, which is a pity. But having said all of that, we have stuck to our guns, and we've made good progress notwithstanding all of that. Moving on to the people in the business, and they remain a key pillar of our sustainability and resilience. And we are committed to providing a caring, safe, and secure working environment in which our people working in our business can fulfill their aspirations and ambitions and aspire to continually improve their circumstances. Our e-learning platform, which is an in-house Mpact e-learning platform with courses related to our business, both leadership and also operational, that's gained a lot of traction, and we're moving now more to an app-based system, which is easier to enroll and also easier to engage with. And we've seen a remarkable uptake from our employees to use the system, which has been very pleasing. Another aspect which has improved in the last year is our safety performance. Both our lost time injury frequency rate and serious injury frequency rate improved, decreasing from previous years. And our safety culture renewal program has played a pivotal role in cementing the culture that we want in our business to prevent incidents from occurring. For our bursary schemes, we've supported 64 students to gain access to tertiary education, and several have been taken up also as interns in the company. We find a lot of students come out of university, they can't get jobs because they don't have experience, and the best way to give them experience is to give them an internship. And after that, they're in quite a good position to go and compete in the market for jobs. And 60 of those 64 are from previously disadvantaged communities, or previously disadvantaged. They're generally children of our employees. And then in 2023, we also retained our level 1 triple BEE rating, just demonstrating our ongoing commitment to transformation. What I'm going to cover now is the investments that we've made over the last year, and just give you an update on those. And hopefully you'll see that while South Africa has got many challenges. We are still seeing tremendous opportunities in the sectors we service. And also, we have taken a proactive approach to developing our resilience starting already in 2015. When you see the slides, I think you'll see that's very much demonstrated. So 18 months or 2 years ago, we said we were going to build a 5.4 megawatt solar installation at our Springs mill. And last year, November, we commissioned it. It's mainly on this area here, in this area here. That's about 5 hectares of land. You use about a hectare per megawatt. So 5 hectares of land, 5.5 hectares of land. There's also some on a building that's on the left here. And in time, we'll convert all of these car parks, wherever we've got space, we'll put solar. You may ask, what's the payback? Simple payback's probably four years, but if you think of the cost of maintaining solar after you've already paid it back, it's quite low relative to the power it generates. There we're saving well over R1 million a month just in electricity costs. And we had one of the councillors, the local councillors from this area, drive past the factory the other day, and he phoned our manager there, Cabello. He's the general manager. He said, Cabello, what are you doing? You're taking food out of my mouth by putting in the solar. He says, yes, well, we've been 52 days without power in 2021, so we're making a plan. And I think the philosophy that we've taken on all of these things is we've got a plan for the services we have from the institutions and not what we hope for, and make a plan. So we're doing this across the business, both in, that's an example of a storage tower. I mean, I'll just talk briefly to what we call, the various means of storing power in a business. Of course, solar generates power, but it doesn't store. But in our Felixton paper mill, for example, we've got what we call pulp batteries. And I don't know, my colleagues made that phrase up, but anyway, what it means is that in a paper mill, you prepare your raw material in a stock preparation area. You pulp your waste paper and all of that, and you put it into a tower, and then through the day you use it on the paper machine to make paper. And in Felixton 2017, when we rebuilt it putting a number of these towers as intermediate storage between the one high energy usage part of the plant and the other. And what we do, why we did that in that time was to take advantage of the high tariff periods in Eskom and the low tariff periods. So in the low tariff period, in the low, of the day, we'd run the whole plant, we'd fill these tanks up, and then at night when it was expensive, then we'd switch off the back end of the plant and use those tanks to feed the paper machine. And so they in effect are storage of power, if you want to think of it like that. And that has contributed to our load curtailment arrangements with Eskom and others. And we're going to do that across all of our paper mills where we have these so-called pulp batteries, which allow us then to reduce not only cost, because we're not running at the expense of time, the full plant, but importantly, load curtailment. When you're required to curtail 30%, you're able to curtail it because you've got storage there and you've got the solar. So when I talk about the process designs also helping to meet our load curtailment arrangements, we're talking about things like that. And I must say, my colleagues in these businesses have been really ingenious and creative in working out how we can make our business run, notwithstanding the many challenges we have. So far we have 16 megawatts of solar across the group. We've got another 11 megawatts in the pipeline. I mean, just to give you an example, at our Mkondo mill, we've got a 100-hectare field. That happens to be next door to an Eskom substation. If I go with 1 megawatt per hectare, you could even contemplate possibly a 100 megawatt installation. We wouldn't need it, and maybe we'd do it with somebody else's money just to get going. But there's lots of opportunities for solar development in South Africa, and we are doing a bit more wheeling and feed-in. It's been quite slow, but in time I think we'll be able to do more of that also with the various municipalities and the governments. Although in our paper mills, the power is fully embedded, it's fully utilized within. There's nothing available for export. Talking about Felixton paper mill. So these are some of the towers that I was talking about. But anyway, there, and incidentally, there's 3.4 megawatts of solar that I did share the last time at Felixton. So during last year, we did complete our Felixton upgrade project, which entailed upgrading the stock preparation area, but also the paper machine, where we put a new shoe press. So we've got 2 shoe presses in there, state-of-the-art paper machine, to produce also another 16,000 tons of container board and grades used for bags, paper bags. So we've really increased our capacity there to meet those requirements. And by implication, we've really improved our cost position tremendously. It was already an extremely good cost position, but it's improved even more. And pleasingly, the technical project objectives have been met comfortably, and in fact, in many cases, exceeded. So that's been money well spent. And notwithstanding the market being very soft at the moment, we're able to compete, notwithstanding, because of the cost position in that mill. It still does pretty well, even in this environment. In our paper converting business, corrugated and dead pack business, we also doing a number of projects, and some of them have already been completed. So the top right here, we've got our new corrugator in Nelspruit, otherwise called Mbombela, which was commissioned at the end of last year, running now very successfully, met all its objectives and are ready for the new fruit season, which is starting up now. And that's really to support the fruit growers in the northern areas, where there's been tremendous growth and a number of plantings. So we remain very excited about that. And this is related to that because this is an external customer service center in the fruit growing area where we do some carton erecting, and we also store some product and service our customers in those areas, which are some distance from Nelspruit. So an example there. Then in Port Elizabeth, otherwise called Gqeberha, we've done our upgrade, 171 odd million rand, which is nearing final completion. That's also to service the fruit sector in the Eastern Cape, which is also growing tremendously. So notwithstanding the many South African challenges, which are affecting local consumers, the sectors that we're in are still showing tremendous opportunity in terms of growth in the fruit side. And the Gqeberha project is aimed at servicing that business. And the next video that I'll show is of that factory, but just bear in mind that it's focused more on the most recent construction of the customer service center, but the entire factory has been upgraded over the last 2 years. And you'll see some buildings in between, which we also own, which we will develop in time. So that's the PE upgrade, and also something we are very excited about. Moving on now to our plastic containers business, and that's the business that, for those in the presentation here, we've got these brochures, pamphlets on the, I wouldn't call them a pamphlet, it's a book of the products that we produce. For those online, you can see it at www.mpcsa.co.za. Many of these products can be bought online. And this business has grown tremendously over the last 6 or 7 years, with a compound annual growth rate of about 22%. In 2025-26, its turnover will be about 4 times what it was in 2018, just to give an example, if all things go well. So it's seen tremendous growth. And the project was, you might recall a couple of presentations ago, originally we planned for this phase to have 9 machines in this building. It's got space for 15. But this project, which was the 200 odd million when it started, it was planned to have 9 in by the end of 2024. And then we would put the others in over time, as the market required, getting us to 15 in 2027. But last year we were presented with a good opportunity to accelerate this project. And that was through the acquisition of 8 additional machines that were secondhand, which we bought in the local market, and the associated molds. And we installed 5 of those machines in this factory. So I must say, my colleagues, so here they are here. So these are 4 of the 5. They came out of where we bought them from. They needed to be completely refurbished, which we did. We installed them, and we gave ourselves an objective of installing them. We got them in March. We thought we could install them by June and have them running, because we didn't get the customers when we bought the machines. We only got the machines. And so it was quite an ambitious project. to get them in. But they did get them in. They weren't all in by June. They weren't all operational, but we didn't drop any customers in any big way. And in addition, we got an opportunity during the year to start producing printed crates. That's a printing line, the 2 printing lines there for printing beer crates, in effect, beverage crates. And that hasn't been done at this sort of scale in South Africa in the past. So we've got 2 of those machines now that are in the market, and they will be coming to the market in the near future. And that was another extension to this project, which was opportunistic, I'd say. So that's brought to 13 the number of machines in the Kosovo factory, plus 2 printing machines, compared to just 9 machines originally, at a substantially lower cost. And by the end of this month or early next month, we'll have 14 machines in there, without necessarily going to all the capital outlay. In time, we will, however, have to change these because they are very old machines. So we've got the market for the time being. We're developing the market. And as the market grows, then we will change them out for newer, more modern machines. On the right here is you can't see behind there, but behind that wall is the automated warehouse, which is currently being finalized. It'll be finished by the end of the year. It's been delayed for a number of reasons, but it's an automated warehouse, state-of-the-art, quite an interesting project, and a very ambitious project as well. And so as a consequence of all of this, I mean, our team was really stretched of this opportunistic sort of acceleration that we had through the year. And that did reflect in our operational performance of bins and crates last year, where we didn't do well compared to our plan or prior. Although our sales were up a lot on prior, we didn't do well compared to our plan. But most of those challenges now been resolved, and we are confident that this business will still yield really great returns for our business in the future. Moving on to the Umkhonto paper mill upgrade project. That's on schedule to be completed early next year or during the course of next year. The costs have been under pressure due to mainly exchange rate effects on imported equipment. At this stage, although it's not final, I mean, we could pull back on some of this. The costs are probably about 6% over the original budget because of the exchange rate movements. And we are doing what we can to see if we can contain that to a lower number. It's not the final number. This project is aimed at increasing the production of high-yield fluting, which is called semi-chemical fluting. And high-yield fluting is used in fruit boxes. So it's also geared towards the fruit industry. So here's an example of a fruit box. For those who don't know, this box has got an outer liner, an inner liner, and in the middle you've got this fluting layer. And the fluting is what gives it a lot of strength. And it needs to be a certain virgin grade to make sure that it doesn't collapse in high humidity conditions. And so Piet Retief, or Umkhonto as it's called, is able to make this product. We do make it at the moment, but we're going to expand the production of that product because South Africa, by our current, on the basis of our current forecasts for fruit expansion in South Africa, will be short of semi-chemical fluting if we don't do it. So another very exciting project. And as a consequence of this project, we'll get an additional byproduct called sodium lignosulfonate powder. We do produce some in liquid form already, and that'll be exported, generating significant dollar revenue. And so notwithstanding the costs pushing up because of that SLS being sold in dollars, the project returns are still projected to be better than the plan for this business. So an exciting project, and one which will bring real value to the industry, I think, because we need the semi-chemical fluting. As I mentioned before, innovation is a cornerstone of our business and remains a cornerstone. And unfortunately, Valeska is not here, but we've got a really well-established and developed research and development facility based here in Stellenbosch, actually. And these investments that we make allow us to identify ways to meet our customers' packaging and other needs, improve their offerings, and contribute to the circular economy. But at the same time, they also enable us to develop new systems of advantage, which include processes and products for existing and new markets. We're very proud that last year again, we won 17 awards through various industry associations, demonstrating that not only are these innovation projects happening, but they are yielding results. But our offering goes well beyond innovative products seen by our customers and on the shelves, boxes and bottles and crates. We follow a systematic approach to innovation that is science-based, multidimensional, and very importantly, it's specifically geared towards the monetization of our efforts, because a lot of times, especially with scientists and to some extent engineers, They get excited about all the technical things, but not they don't really follow through on the commercial aspects. But I'd say that in our team there, we've got a very astute team who are able to bring it through to monetization. A good example of these efforts going beyond just the products that we produce is a number of engagements that our team have had with some customers in the recent past. For example, we were with a significant big customer recently, and the meeting was arranged to go and talk about the pricing of a particular product. And the multi-disciplinary team went along. Valeska and her colleague, one of her colleagues, and somebody from our waste management business went along. And it was a 2-hour meeting eventually. They spoke 15 minutes about the product, but the other 1 hour 45 about the opportunities that we were able to present and put on the table for them. Not only in the terms of our product, but in terms of them closing the loop on their own business, improving their circularity, and importantly, thinking about packaging products completely differently to what they had done in the past in terms of life cycle assessment and things like that. And it was quite affirming when they fed back to me afterwards that at the end of the engagement, the customer said to them, they've always thought of the suppliers of just box and bottle suppliers. But after this discussion, they realize when they buy the box or the bottle from Mpact, it comes with a lot more inside than just the packaging. And I thought that was really reaffirming. And since, we've had a number of engagements to work out what their own innovation objectives are and a number of workshops to develop those. And it's been very fruitful. So we're very grateful for that. Another example of doing things differently is this one that we've spent the last 2.5 years intensively working on. Before that, we were working on it, but we decided to put a lot of effort into it 2.5 years ago. And just to explain it, we call it the fresh produce ventilation system. So, fresh produce goes in through the cold chain, as most of you may know. It's either in a cold store, it's packed, and then it's in a cold store. You've got to get the temperature down quickly, and then it goes through the logistics chain in refrigerated containers, and you've got to keep the temperature constant and to ensure the fruit quality and that the fruit is able to arrive at its destination still fit for use and fresh. So 2.5 years ago, we've done a lot of computer fluid dynamic modeling for our paper mills. So in our pulp mill, for example, you're always doing different modeling to work out what the flow is of the material inside the pulp, inside the digester. So we took some of that learning, and this is Valeska and her team. We went off to see the people who do the CFD modeling, and we asked them if they would help us to model fruit, so we could work out through modeling, not through only in-field trials, what the best heat transfer characteristics are and what the best configurations are for packaging. Because we produce, if you look in this brochure that I gave, we produce a plastic pallet. We can produce a corrugated box that goes on the pallet. We can produce a plastic crate that goes on the pallet stacked. We produce a punnet that goes in the box. We can produce a paper bag or a paper punnet or a plastic punnet. And so we have the whole configuration. So what this entailed was, firstly, we had to model a berry. We chose berries because they're less regulated in South Africa than, for example, the established fruit like grapes and what have you. So we said, let's start with berries and see how we could develop a project in this regard. So you have to start with modeling a berry and the heat transfer characteristics of a berry just on its own. Then you have to look at a whole bunch of berries, or what's the collective word for berries? I don't know. A whole lot of berries. And then you have to take a whole lot of berries in a punnet. And then you have to take the punnet in a crate. Then you have to take the crates on a pallet, and then you have to take the pallets in a cooling environment and do the CFD modeling. It takes quite a long time. It takes quite long to run a model. It can take a month or whatever. It's taken us a long time to do this. But as a result of this, we've got a very good system now for understanding what configurations work best. And there's some interesting insights which are obvious once I tell you, but not everybody thinks about them. So to give you an example, this, by the way, we didn't need to do this test to do this, but it's interesting to note once you do it that it's true. This is a corrugated box. This happens to be for citrus, but I mean, if you think of a grape box or berry box, great for handling and everything. And this is a plastic crate that's used for a similar purpose, maybe not the same size, just for the demonstration. But what's interesting is this is a perfect insulator, corrugated, because it's got an inside layer, an outside layer, and in the middle it's got an air gap. And if you want to insulate your house, first thing you look for is an air gap in the wall to insulate it. So perfect insulator, which is terrible for heat transfer if you're trying to cool fruit down that's gone into a box, just as it goes into the container. And so through the modeling, I'm not suggesting for 1 minute that we have to move now immediately from corrugated boxes to plastic crates, but there is a move in some cases. But you need to start thinking differently about the corrugated box and how you configure it so that you don't inhibit the ability to reduce the temperature of the fruit quickly and homogeneously across the container or in the pack house. And through this work now, we've looked at a number of different configurations, and we've demonstrated we're in field trials now. We are busy shipping some stuff abroad in this way. We can reduce, for example, energy costs by 15%, by configuring the packaging differently. And when you start talking like that, all of a sudden the cost of the box is not trivial, because never trivial. I mean, always you want to save, but we can bring a lot more than just the box. And we've built now, I think, a system of advantage here, which is underpinned by real science. It's not dreams. It's all of those things on the screen: faster throughput, faster cooling, energy savings, better quality, because if you got all of that right, you've got better quality at the end, which means higher willingness to pay by the customers on the other side. And that's a demonstration of moving beyond just the packaging when it comes to the innovation efforts. And we spend in the context of maybe some massive companies, not a lot on innovation, but for a packaging company, quite a lot. And I think it's nice to see that it's actually bearing fruit. And all of this underpinned by our strategy, which is built on 3 key pillars, and that's putting our customers first, being the best at what we do, and a phrase we borrowed from Phil Knight of Nike, making a decent profit decently. I'll move now on to the financial review, starting with the group numbers. So group revenue from our continuing operations increased by 3.6% to 12.8 billion rand, and that's despite sales volumes declining by 10.7%. As I mentioned earlier, we achieved record cash flow from operations of 2 billion on improved profitability and a pleasing reduction in working capital. Underlying operating profit of 1.2 billion increased 4%, mainly due to recovery in margins following the squeeze in the prior year and the benefits of recently completed investment projects. The underlying profit margin increased to 9.4%. It was in line with the prior year, 9.4%. Headline earnings per share increased 8% to 512 cents for total operations and by 3% for continuing operations, with the difference being attributable to the better performance in Mpact compared to the prior year. Return on capital employed for the group was 17.4% for total operations and 16.6% for continuing operations. That's compared to 18.5% in the prior year. Gearing was 32.9% with net debt of 2.67 billion. And that's after paying out dividends of 176 million and investing 1.5 billion during the year in capital projects, which are aligned with the growth that I've mentioned earlier. Working capital was well managed, reducing by 108 million rand compared to the prior year, with a cash conversion cycle of around 62 days compared to 63 days the year before. The board approved a final dividend of 75 cents per share, bringing the total dividend for the year to 120 cents per share. That's the highest since our listing in 2011. I'm talking about the different businesses now, starting with the paper business. In the paper business, our revenue of 10.7 billion rand was 3.3% higher than the prior period. That's due to higher selling prices, which were partially offset by an 11% decline in volumes. Demand was weak throughout the year, but the 2 halves of the year were very different from our perspective in the business. The first half of last year was characterized by better margins from the selling price recovery at the end of 2022, which offset the effects of lower sales volumes and the related commercial downtime at the paper mills. But the second half proved much more challenging, with margin erosion due to cost inflation and pressure on selling prices due to the oversupply of containerboard and cartonboard globally. Paper manufacturing total sales declined by 15%, with both halves being about the same. And that decline reflected the overstocking by customers and also the economy being down generally. As I mentioned earlier, that slowdown in the paper mills necessitated production downtime at the containerboard mills to avoid locking up cash. And we took Felixstowe and Piet Retief down for an equivalent of 16% of the annual capacity in commercial downtime during the year. Besides that, the paper mills actually ran quite well for the year. You were operating efficiencies up, and our philosophy in the paper mills is when we run, we must run full speed and then stop, because there's this temptation to run at a slower speed, but that really messes your efficiencies badly. So we avoid that if we can. The Springs paper mill didn't take as much commercial downtime, but we had 38 days of production downtime due to municipal outages there, which have remained a problem in that area. In another effort to address these persistent challenges from the Springs and the Ekurhuleni municipalities, we did host last year a number of engagements with the Premier of Gauteng, the Deputy Minister of Trade and Industry and Competition, as well as the Mayor of the city of Ekurhuleni, who all came to our factory for us to highlight the challenges that we're having there. And we did see, I must say, we have still until today seen a notable improvement in the communication and cooperation with city officials following those engagements, but many challenges do still exist, as you can imagine. In paper converting, our volumes declined 7%, with declines in both agricultural and industrial sectors. In the agricultural sector, the sales declined by 3%, with good growth in citrus, avocados, tomatoes, and tomatoes offset by declines in grapes, plum fruit, and stone fruit. And those were affected by the adverse weather I mentioned earlier in the Western and Eastern Cape. Bananas also decreased last year. The paper business operating profit increased by 5.3% to 1.2 billion rand as a result of the recovering gross margins, improved efficiencies, and low provisions for bad debts compared to the prior year. Most operations reported improved profitability last year, with a notable exception being our Gauteng corrugated operation, which reported a significant decline after struggling with a number of internal issues last year. We've implemented several far-reaching measures there now to turn things around in corrugated and put us on a better footing for the future, and improve its performance not only in future but in the year ahead. As I already mentioned, the two upgrade projects at Felixton Mill and Nelspruit Corrugated were successfully completed during the year, second half specifically, and that reduced profits by approximately 60 million rand in line with the project plans for those businesses. Moving on now to the plastics business. Just remember that this report excludes Versapack, which is reported as held for sale and discontinued operation. I'll deal with that separately. Revenue in plastics increased just short of 6% to 2.2 billion rand, with average prices increasing 9.5% due to a favorable sales mix and higher selling prices. Volumes declined by 3.8% due to a 12.4% decline in preforms and closures compared to the prior year. Bins and crates volumes were up 10.8% on the back of the Castleview investments, and FMCG sales volumes increased by 2.3% as a consequence of some market share gains, with some competitors apparently switching their focus and others affected by floods in the Cape. While preforms and closures volumes declined, the sales mix was favorable, with closures up and jar and bottle volumes down. And costs were lower following the successful plant rationalization that I spoke about previously in 2022. And so our profitability, despite the volume going down 12%, actually increased in preforms and closures. In general, we are seeing our FMCG customers reporting a lot of pressure due to the contraction in consumer spending, and we expect that to continue for the foreseeable future. Volume growth in bins and crates was underpinned by our recent investments, with gains in agricultural bins, export jumbo bins, material handling crates, bottling crates, and retail, which were partially offset by declines in wheelie bins and local jumbo bins. Notwithstanding the fact that our sales were up 11%, we didn't meet our plan, which was substantially higher due to the internal issues I spoke about earlier in bins and crates. Underlying operating profit for the plastics business therefore declined 4.5% to 189 million rand, with increases in FMCG and preforms and closures offset by a significant decline in bins and crates. The bins and crates operating profit declined 44% compared to the prior year due to one of the suppliers of imported raw material being placed into the business rescue in early October. The associated costs amounted to approximately 80 million rand, mainly in respect of payments made by our bins and crates business plastic containers for polymer that wasn't received. So we are pursuing, obviously, several avenues to secure our outstanding material and also to recover payments made, including legal proceedings. But notwithstanding these efforts, it's unlikely that we'll recover all of this money. Another key aspect of our strategy, as I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, is portfolio optimization. And through the capital allocation and disposals, we're reducing our exposure to sectors not fully aligned with the group strategy, or otherwise where the returns are uneconomical and unsustainable. Accordingly, our plastics, preforms and closures business has not renewed 2 contracts with a major customer, which expire at the end of June this year, 2024. And that's because we couldn't reach agreement with a customer on terms considered economically viable for us to invest a significant amount of capital in new technology at prices which didn't give any return in our assessment. But we're not exiting the sector entirely at this stage, because we believe that there are still reasonable prospects in certain areas, and extensive efforts are being made to secure new sustainable business from other customers. And further steps will be taken in that business to right size it as required once the final contractual commitments have been fulfilled during 2024. Accordingly, goodwill of 92 million rand attributable to that preforms and closures business was impaired in December 2023. Based on current prices, net reduction in revenue is expected to be about 190 million rand in the plastics business for 2024, and 270 million per annum thereafter, before accounting for any new business that we may gain in that business. And that amounts to around 10% of the plastics business's revenue. Just to put that in contrast, we expect in our plastic containers business, MPC, annual revenue to increase significantly more than this at better margins, over the next couple of years. And that hopefully demonstrates the whole point about portfolio optimization and actively managing it. The sale of Versapack was still in progress at the end of the year, and that's also part of our portfolio optimization. But notwithstanding the fact that it's held for sale, we're still managing it and very diligently, because we have that responsibility until it's sold. And we're very fortunate to have a committed management team at Versapack who have showed great improvement over the past few years. So Versapack improved its revenue last year by 2.6 billion to 1.1 billion rand on the back of high average prices, which were up 3.4% on the prior year. Sales volumes declined marginally, with strong growth in PET trays and punnets offset by a decline in styrene trays. The decline in styrene is due in part to repricing certain product categories to sustainable levels in that business, as well as lower demand in some sectors. So as we've reported, Versapack's underlying operating profit increased by 57% to 101 million rand, with this improvement being attributed to a favorable sales mix, variance, better efficiencies, and improved gross margins following the squeeze in 2022, with raw materials costs declining due to improved yields and also lower purchase prices. Just remember that Versapack's reported profit excludes intercompany costs of approximately 33 million rand, which are reported in continuing operations in accordance with accounting treatment. And if you want to understand how that works, I'm sure Brett can educate you. As reported, Versapack's net earnings increased to 176 million rand, which equates to underlying earnings per Mpact share of 69.3 cents. And their assets held for sale amounted to 240 million rand at the end of the year, compared to 191 the year before. The net earnings in Versapack include a favorable fair value adjustment of 74 million rand for Versapack, which is reported as a special item and therefore excluded from underlying and headline earnings. So the 57% increase to 101 in operating profit excludes the 74 million rand. It's not that doesn't include the 74. The 74 comes below that line. Pleasingly, Versapack also generated positive cash flow for last year of 71 million rand, which I think is a good achievement, even though you've grown the business in certain areas. I'm now going to hand over to Brett, and following that, I'll take you through the outlook. Thank you, Brett. Sorry. Remove it there.
Starting with variable costs from continuing operations. During the year, Mpact experienced significant cost increases, particularly in virgin containerboard and coal. While total variable costs increased 1%, variable cost per ton increased by 11.7%. Paper business raw materials increased by 2% in absolute terms. However, taking the volume decrease of 11.2% into account, the cost per ton increased by 13.2%. The major cost increases related to the purchase of containerboard, which per ton increased by over 20% and comprised roughly half of Impact's total paper raw material costs. On the graph on the top right-hand side of the slide reflects international recovered paper costs, which on average were lower than the prior year. In South Africa, recovered paper costs, which makes up a quarter of Impact's total paper raw material costs, remained flat on a cost per ton basis. Plastic raw material costs decreased by 8.2% in absolute terms due to lower volumes sold of about 3% and then lower actual raw material costs. Energy costs increased 8%, mainly on the back of the 37% increase in coal prices, and this was partly offset by the lower coal usage resulting from the commercial downtime that we had at our paper mills. Selling expenses decreased by 4% due to lower sales volumes compared to the prior year. Fixed costs. Overall fixed costs increased by 9.1%, with personnel costs, which increased by 7.5% due to wage settlements of approximately 7% and additional overtime work during load shedding and the implementation of our various projects. Maintenance costs were up 12.9% as a result of the expanded operations in bins and crates, as well as the higher costs related to the power interruptions and the effect of the weaker rand on imported spares. Net operating expenses increased 17.6%, and that was mainly due to the once-off cost of 66 million in bins and crates that Bruce spoke about earlier. Financial review. The increase in underlying operating profit of 1.2 billion was offset by higher net finance costs. This resulted in an 8% decrease in underlying profit before tax of 944 million. Special items related to mainly the impairment of goodwill of 92 million in the preforms and closures business. The profit from Versapack, which is held for sale and classified as a discontinued operation, increased by 58% due to improved product mix and improved margins. In addition, the plant and equipment has been written up by 74 billion to better reflect the anticipated sale value of the business. Reported basic earnings from total operations was 715 million, while headline earnings per share from total operations increased by 8% to 512 cents per share. ROCE and net debt. Return on capital employed of 17.4% reflects an increase in earnings before interest and tax of 7%, offset by the higher capital employed due to our increased investments. Strong operating cash flows with well-managed working capital during the period allowed the group to implement its strategy through investments in capital projects of 1.5 billion, while limiting the increase in our net debt to 338 million. Gearing closed at 32.9%, with net debt to EBITDA of 1.4 times. Net finance costs and net debt. Looking at the second line on the slide, average net debt increased by 25.6% to 2.9 billion. The higher average net debt, coupled with the higher interest rates, has meant that net finance costs for the period increased to 284 million, with interest cover now at 4.3 times. Long-term debt facilities. In 2022, Mpact renewed its 3- and 4-year debt facilities of 2.6 billion. And then in February last year, an additional 4-year committed facility of 1.45 billion was concluded to ensure that we had enough facilities to fund the Mkondo Mill project. Mpact comfortably met its covenants during the period and achieved its targets for carbon emission and water efficiency, which gives us a slight reduction in our funding rates for the period ahead. Trade working capital. Trade working capital as a percentage of revenue decreased to 21.9%. When compared to the prior year, lower raw material stock holdings across most of the businesses was offset by the increase in the cost per ton of raw materials, resulting in the value of inventory increasing by 1%. Trade receivables and trade payables were generally in line with the turnover increase of just over 3%. Movements in net debt. Mpact generated record cash flows from operations from working capital of 1.9 billion. And this we invested 1.5 billion in our capital projects and paid 470 million in dividends and interest during the period. The result is our net debt ended at 2.67 billion. Taxation. The effective tax rate from the year is estimated at 24.7% and is lower than the statutory rate of 27% due to the recognition of a deferred tax asset of 64 million attributable to the previously unrecognized tax losses. Our gross unrecognized tax losses within the group that we haven't recognized adds up to 477 million. That will be recognized over the next few years. Capital expenditure and cash flows. Capital expenditure cash flows for the period of 1.54 billion was invested in line with the group strategy in growth, innovation, and sustainability projects. 1 billion was invested in paper business, 361 million in the plastics business, and 114 in central remained mainly to solar projects in our properties. These investments, as mentioned by Bruce, included capital expenditure on the Felixstowe Mill upgrade project, the Mkondo paper mill project, and various paper converting projects to increase capacity to supply the anticipated growth in the agricultural sector. In plastics, the largest investments were in bins and crates business with new at Castleview. The Mkondo Mill project comprises half of the total commitments of 2 billion rand, of which 1.7 billion is estimated to be spent in the next 12 months. The benefits of some of these projects is already coming through, and they look positive in terms of future returns. Dividends. The board has declared a final dividend of 0.75, bringing the total dividend for the year to 1.20. This equates to 3.4 times dividend cover from continuing operations and demonstrates our confidence in our strategy and prospects, while also considering the trading environment and the significant capital projects ahead. Thank you very much, and I'd like to hand you over to Bruce.
Thanks, Bert. The sound still good there? Thank you. So moving on now to the outlook. We still see, certainly in South Africa, consumer demand expected to remain under pressure. Our economy is still severely impacted by load shedding, increased costs of living. And of course, then we've got the national elections coming up in May, which add another level of uncertainty to operating environment. And so we see sales volumes in the local market expected to remain under pressure for the foreseeable future across most businesses. And input cost escalation is still a concern, notwithstanding the low demand. We're seeing administered prices rising above CPI still, and benchmark prices for raw materials such as bleached pulp, which we use in our Springs mill, going up quite substantially in the recent past, as well as polymers, which have started increasing notably in the recent past. We do continue to monitor and evaluate all these issues so that we can proactively manage the inherent risks, but also identify opportunities that they do present from time to time. The outlook for the fruit sector in South Africa has improved compared to last year, thanks to more favorable weather conditions, and investments that our producers have made for growth in their various sectors, and those are starting to come through. But their demand for packaging will depend on their ability to get the produce through the ports and shipped timeously. And as many of you would have read and know from firsthand, port constraints remain a tremendous concern in the economy, not only for the fruit sector but for many other sectors. And that's, of course, with the Middle East crisis now, shipping costs have started rising again for certain routes. But I've always been remarkably impressed with the ingenuity and resilience of the fruit producing community in South Africa to make a plan to work things out. They're already working on the next season in terms of grapes to ship from different ports, for example, so you don't have the congestion in the Cape at one point. And I think there's been some positive changes at Transnet quite recently, so hopefully those will add to a better future in that respect. We do expect containerboard customer stocks to normalize in the year ahead, as they work down the imported stocks. And so eventually sales will better reflect the actual demand and consumption in South Africa. But the benefits of higher volumes may be offset by lower prices due to the oversupply of containerboard globally. As you may have read, many producers globally have announced price hikes in containerboard, but it's uncertain about whether they'll stick or not. If they do, then that will obviously buoy. And I think a lot of those price hikes are being underpinned by cost increases rather than demand, because everybody's facing a bit of a squeeze when it comes to costs. We will continue to manage our capacity in our paper mills to avoid locking up cash in stock if market conditions require in the year ahead. We do expect a significant improvement in our bins and crates business in 2024 following the challenges we had last year. And that should offset the effects of lower sales in preforms and closures for the reasons I already mentioned. Should conditions improve across most of our businesses, we have definitely got the capabilities to realize growth quickly, and with that also improved profitability that would come with it. So overall, we remain confident in our value-enhancing strategy, and that prioritizes the growth segments that I mentioned, and investments in higher margin products and moving out of products that are less aligned to our strategy. And those include fruit exports, returnable transit packaging, convenient shopping and recycling. And some of these, as you'll know, are somewhat insulated from South African consumer spending. And that helps our earnings through the cycle, I think, to reflect a more constant mix. And we remain committed to executing this strategy and stand ready to do what's required. So in closing, I'd just like to thank our chairman, Tony, as I mentioned, been here every single time, and the board for their invaluable commitment and support during the last year, which was a very challenging year. Neelan Naidu, the MD of our plastics business, retired at the end of December 2023. And as you'd have read, Brett is also retiring at the end of May 2024 after reaching his normal retirement age. So we thank Neelan and Brett for their contribution to our success over many years of working with us and of their service. And we're currently in the process of recruiting a new CFO. And I want to thank all our employees and our management teams for their commitment and resilience, and of course our shareholders, customers, suppliers, and other business partners for their ongoing support. Thank you very much.